Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast. To join a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice, head to xyadvisor.com. This episode is proudly sponsored by Integrity Life. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that life is unpredictable, which is why you need to work with a partner that's flexible and loves to collaborate. One that will personalize the claims experience for your clients, one with a balanced approach to underwriting, and one with a competitive and sustainable pricing. Integrity, your partner for life. If you want to learn more about how Integrity is your partner for life, head to integritylife.com.au/XY.
Welcome to the XY podcast, Gianni.
Thanks, Fraser. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. You actually are my first interview, my first guest as the new host of this show.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, glad to be that.
So thank you. Thank you for coming along.
Very good.
Now, do you want to give the members and the listeners a quick overview of yourself?
Yeah, look, my name is Gianni Musumeci. My history within financial advice started about 10, 11 years ago now. I was a paraplanner with one of the big four banks, and I stayed in paraplanning for about 4 or 5 years before becoming a senior business analyst in paraplanning itself, and then moving on to financial advice. So becoming a senior business analyst within the financial advice head office. Shortly after, I joined a fintech, providing financial advice software to licensees, dealer groups, and independent financial advisors, before moving back to the big bank head office. And then more recently, I've joined Aware Super as the Intrafund practice and process manager.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Your story is fantastic. It's starting off in a very specialized area, and then also in a corporate environment, and helping planners create plans and going through strategy and getting really deep into the strategies being rolled out, and then also following your passion along the idea of the technology and how do you actually help people like yourself, the paraplanner, and the advisors, and be better at what they're doing.
Yeah. No, I always thought that I had a great grasp and understanding of the process of providing financial advice. And I really think that helped me throughout the years, both on the software vendor side and the customer side as well.
Yeah, you're definitely a process guy, right? That's your
exactly.
That's
what
lights you up.
It's in my title, so yeah.
And even following you on social media, following you on LinkedIn, you do a lot of training, exercise outside of work, and that's still a process.
Yeah, I've got a sort of a side goal, or two side goals rather. I want to be able to do 5 unassisted muscle-ups. So I've been practicing that. I do that 3 times a week. And I've got another goal of being selected for Australian Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I watched your video that you did on your application video. How did that go? Have you heard back from them? I know you're sort of very focused on the idea of your son, seeing that and seeing you on the show.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything back from them. So if you're listening, I'm waiting for a reply. But my son, my youngest son, loves to watch Australian Ninja Warrior, and I want to sort of make him believe that he can do the same thing. He sort of sees these people as movie stars, and it's not reality sort of thing. They're on the TV, but I want him to sort of understand that you too can be just like these people as well, and he should sort of reach for those goals as well.
Fantastic. What's your nickname going to be? Like they have the tradie warrior, and are you going to be the financial advice warrior guy, or what's your?
I was thinking about that, and a lot of people comment on the fact that I get up early in the morning. So I like to get up early. So I was thinking about calling myself the 4 a.m. ninja.
4 a.m. ninja, nice. I like it. Let's get behind you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, as we go through, I'm still going back through your past. You worked for a fintech. You really loved your technology side of it. You came to that position, I guess, from a user point of view. Yeah. Although we sort of let's say human point of view, the fact that you were using software in that space, and then you went back to a large corporate again. That's a huge change from large corporates to back to small fintech and back to corporates.
Yeah, so I think early on in my career, I felt that I was a go-to person or an SME, particularly within paraplanning, and the amount of software that we used. I would always be relied upon to do things like template coding within software and software testing whenever a new upgrade was provided to us. So I had a great grasp of firstly process, but secondly, how we interacted with the software at each step in the process as well. And like many people, I may have become frustrated at some of the shortcomings that software provided us. So I wanted to solve those problems and use my experience in the small sort of fintech environment, because for me, that was where the most change, or I could actually implement the most change in those sort of small fintech environments.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of frustration when it comes to technology, and we're lucky in some ways where we get served up technology from, let's face it, big groups, whether it be the Apples of the world or whatever it might be, and it works first time and it's great and it's fantastic and it's very easy. And then you try and overlay an extremely complex process of financial planning into software, and we all get frustrated. Why can't it be easy?
Yeah. There's always the saying, "Oh, it looks good in the demo," but but everybody wants it customized to their own processes and their own templates and artifacts as well. So a lot of software has to be sort of robust enough to provide us with the needs and the automation and the requirements, but nimble enough to be customizable and have everybody's own flavor, particularly in financial advice as well.
Yeah, is that where the profession has let itself down a little bit? Because I see this whole customization piece as if we've got 2,000 flavors of the same product, it seems a bit crazy that we've spent all that money on creating 2,000 variants of one thing that's supposed to do one thing for, let's face it, a customer or a person who's going to benefit the most out of it, which is the client, in order to benefit them. But we've got all these different versions, and there's so much money spent throughout the process. And you've obviously worked in corporates, you know how much money goes into these things. Is that a mistake we've made along the way?
I don't think it's a mistake. I think what it is it's the environment, because we all provide either the same or similar products and services, from bank accounts to home loans to super funds. They're all the same or similar, but what differentiates one from another is the service and the manner of that service that they provide. So you need to be able to differentiate yourself. So the same difference between an independent financial advisor and a big licensee, the independent will have a much sort of stronger relationship with your one-on-one financial advisor, whereas the licensee will have the backing and the rapport of a big brand and the security that they're able to provide. So although that we do provide similar products and services, we still need to differentiate ourselves between from person to person, or group to group rather.
Yeah. Now you've worked in the big end of town and the small fintech. There seems to me like there's a big gap between those two enterprises, and I know that they're within good reason, because fintechs need to build slowly and grow organically and along the way. And they're never going to be able to roll out of the box, a completely end-to-end system. Versus like for a larger end of town wants that security, and you've been around for many years, and those sorts of things. Talk to me about that gap. Like it seems like it's really wide, and why is it so wide, and how can we solve that?
Look, some of the things that we could sort of look to do to solve is, for me, it's sort of easier access to advice. I feel that people are reluctant to sort of receive advice because, number one, they think it's too expensive. Number two, they may think it's too convoluted, and they're not understanding of the process of providing advice. So if there was a happy medium between those two examples that you provided, I think people would be less sort of reluctant to receive financial advice. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, you mentioned, cost and complexity as the two barriers. And obviously there's no one's going to disagree with that. Listening to this, they're all, financial planning and financial advisors. So they understand that it's a complex and an expensive product or service to deliver. And so, there is certainly an interesting gap of how technology can fill or create tech efficiencies. Talk to me about those efficiencies in tech. And I know we sort of mentioned the idea around admin and those sorts of, there's all sorts of different areas. How do you see the big efficiencies from technology being created?
Well, I think some of the efficiencies that technology can provide within financial advice is reducing the amount of admin that's required. So admin is what's known as a non-value add. The customer doesn't want to pay for it, but it needs to be done. Like you need to enter the details into the system and that sort of stuff. Now, some of the other efficiencies is reducing some of the compliance burdens that are required within financial advice. We've seen more recently the requirements of like an FDS or opt-in and tracking those as well. So that's technology can assist with some of the compliance requirements associated with providing advice as well. But it can also provide us with valuable insights as well. So some of the data and reporting that we can get from technology, some of the trends and tracking, and then some of the services that we can provide to clients on the back of that, such as client portal access, easy two-way communication, even to the point of the wet signature and holding an interview like we are currently via Zoom. All those things can be done using technology now. So it's really all about reducing the cost, reducing the burden of compliance, and providing speed and efficiency to the financial advice process, which makes things cheaper for the end customer.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the concept of the scale advice. And obviously, you're with Aware Super, and a big part of what you're doing there and what they're doing is the scaled advice and intrafund advice. Do you want to let's talk about what your take is on intrafund advice and how that works for your members?
Well, I think Intrafund Advice is a perfect sort of stepping stone for advice members to sort of receive either general or limited advice in terms of their superannuation and their insurance, to give them an understanding of how they're tracking in terms of their superannuation goals as well. And it's relatively cost-effective advice. It's either free or very cheap. And a lot of super fund members may not know that they already have access to this form of advice already. So I think that if more members were introduced to scaled or intrafund advice, that they would have a greater understanding of financial advice and their own financial situation as well. And we'd see a level of financial understanding, like a greater level of financial understanding out there in the environment.
Yeah, it's an interesting part of a client's needs, not so much an advice process, but really a client's needs to saying, I've got an instant need or a very specific need, and here is something that's available to me. If they know about it, because that's the other thing too, they may not know how that works or think they have to pay. Something that's available to me that I can just use and do this one thing. How's intrafund advice working with financial advisors providing full financial, comprehensive or more comprehensive advice, and with the funds and advisors?
Yeah, so what normally happens within Aware is the Aware Super members are able to call our member engagement team, and what happens is they're triaged in terms of their advice needs as well. So when they're triaged, they come to a decision point whether, based on their advice needs, they require intrafund, comprehensive, or even specialist advice. So the specialist advice being insurance or aged care predominantly. So if after having a discussion with our member engagement team, they come through to intrafund advice, the intrafund advice is predominantly around, or it's relatively scoped around super and insurances. So some of the advice that they can provide is around salary sacrificing, ensuring that the super is invested appropriately, providing projections to ensure that they're on track to meet their retirement goals, commencing a retirement income stream or transition to retirement income stream within a fine scope. So it's based on specific goals and objectives. They can't provide advice on a broad range of goals and objectives. It's very specified and scaled. Yeah.
So specified to their retirement benefits, or
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't encompass a large amount of the client's objectives. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And so when it comes to the idea of intrafund advice being paid for by members and not necessarily by the individual, what are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, there's people on both sides of this on this fence, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's a service that's being provided. So, look, I sort of liken it to you pay your council rates regardless of how much rubbish you throw in the bin. So you might as well fill up the bin. It might be a silly analogy, but it's true. Like you pay the same water rates, the same council rates. The service is there and it's offered. So it's there and available for you to use. So if you're looking for scaled advice or general advice, it's more than available there, and it's only going to increase your understanding of the financial advice process and your financial situation.
Yeah, when you said when you gave that example, I actually thought about the ASIC charge that financial advisors pay every year. You know, they're paying for that ASIC to run, and whether they're the ones in the spotlight or getting audited by ASIC or not.
Yeah, that's it. That's probably a better example.
Fill up the bin.
Yeah.
No, very good. And so tell us about your role there, you know, regarding process as the process manager, because you're not directly looking after the financial advisors themselves.
No, I don't have any direct reports. So nobody reports to me directly. I manage predominantly the process of providing financial advice. So I ensure that the process is efficient, that it's compliant, and then I'm always looking to continually improve the process as well. So by continually improving the process, I look to remove any inefficiencies or wastes or non-value add. And then I always look for opportunities to do better. So we can always look to reduce the turnaround time associated with providing financial advice and reducing the touch time associated with providing financial advice so that our members get more advice at a quicker pace.
Yeah. So tell us about how you do that. You obviously have to start with the advisors and the process and the client or member engagements and then work your way back.
Yeah, so what I do is, especially when I'm new to a business, is I map the process and understand the process as best I can. And then I sort of understand each step, how long does it take, what is the wait time between each step in the process, and is that step a value add, non-value add, or business value add step in the process. So value add is something that the customer is willing to pay for. Non-value add is the example I gave before. It's administration that the customer isn't willing to pay for. And then business value add is something that's just sort of required due to legislation or business policy. So it's something that we have to do. Now, even though something might be a step in the process, may be business value add, that doesn't mean we can't make things a little bit easier or quicker in terms of the amount of time that we spend doing that business value add step. So there's no such thing as perfection, and we're always looking to sort of reinvent or enhance the process as well. And then there's always the odd curveball that the financial advice system throws at us every 12 months or so.
Yeah. So how much of your role is just like fixing the existing process versus coming at it from that higher level and going, well, actually, you know, this whole process is ridiculous. Let's try something new.
Yeah. So wherever I've sort of worked, I've always tried to embed a continuous improvement process where not only myself but team members can come up with suggestions to ensure that either problems or opportunities are addressed. So a problem may not be large. Okay, it may sort of be insignificant in terms of its impact, but it could be frequently occurring. Now, if you put a measure on that over the course of a year, that could be significant. So if we solve this small process that was frequently occurring, we might have a significant benefit on our hands. In addition, if we look to reduce the overall cost of providing end-to-end advice as well, if we reduce that by a few dollars, we create further capacity and we're able to provide more cost-effective advice at a quicker turnaround time. So it not only benefits the end client, but it benefits the business as well.
Yeah, so you're doing a lot of measuring as you're going along and making just defining and working out what these efficiencies are.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of touch time, turnaround time, wait time analysis, a lot of waste analysis, sort of understanding where defects occur, where we can prevent defects, how we can stop risks from occurring. Yeah, that sort of stuff.
Very good. Now, you and I have spoken before about the idea around, the behavioural side of this as well, because to me, there's two sides of it. There's this process efficiencies where you go, well, technically we can do these things, but then as human beings, we don't always behave that way. Yeah,
exactly. Some things sort of occur as a result of our behaviors. So look, I gave an example where I'm doing some behavioral bias study at the moment. So I gave an example where, a member might walk in and they have a specific requirement. So where, I want to buy property through an SMSF, or I want to, can you tell me how much I need to salary sacrifice, without sort of understanding the reason behind that. And that's where I think, financial advice comes in, not only because, they need to address the members' concerns, but they need to understand why they're asking these sort of questions. So, why are you asking about, buying property through an SMSF or salary sacrificing? And they may say, I spoke to a friend of mine at a barbecue who did the same thing. And then they've sort of developed this behavioral bias around, my friend's making money doing this, I need to do the same thing. And then, they jump online and they look through social media and they see, because they've Googled it, all their cookies bring up all these other ads and articles for, make it easy to buy property through an SMSF. And they've developed an overconfidence bias now because they've Googled it. They think they're experts now. So they want you to facilitate what they think they're an expert at. And so over the course of what might be a week, they've developed all these sort of behavioral and overconfidence biases that necessarily don't make them any more competent, but give them the self-belief that they know what they're doing.
Yes, I know that's exactly the case, where you get a little bit of information on something and all of a sudden you're the expert, and then the more you learn, the more you realize that you're not the expert, and you start toning down a little bit. Yeah, you got to get over that excitement period, I guess.
Yeah. It's always the sort of honeymoon period when you get a bright idea. Oh, yeah, I know exactly what to do. Yeah, I'll walk down to the bank and I'll do it myself, sort of thing.
Yeah. So the behavioural bias stuff's really interesting, and the behavioural stuff. So what else are you doing in that space around, behavioural finance and those sorts of things?
Yeah. So some of the interactions I've had with sort of advice compliance are around sort of understanding the need that the client has, especially. So particularly with things like the best interest duty and safe harbour steps, we sort of need to understand, well, what is the reason for the client asking this particular question, even though that might have a goal of implementing that particular strategy. They have objectives behind that. So, for example, they want to be comfortable in retirement, they want to generate an income, and they feel that particular strategy is the best way of doing so. But based on their competence and their the amount of time that they have, it might not be the best fit for them as well. So not everybody has the amount of time and competence to manage a self-managed super fund and buy property. They're more than likely there's better alternatives for them to be able to reach their objectives.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that we make decisions, isn't it? It's sort of like, I would say this, our emotional brain makes the decision generally, and we push generally people push the financial side of it out of the way and make an emotional decision, or they push the rational side out of the way and then make emotional decisions. And it's interesting. It brings me back to the article that I read that you've recently written on a mortgage, for example. Do you want to chat about that?
Yeah. So particularly in the area I live in, I think the median price range, particularly in my suburb, is around $2 million. I know in Sydney it's a lot less than that. It's about 800,000. And I'm just not a big fan of, look, I'm in my mid-30s, and my wife and I were sort of talking about, look, if we had to buy our forever home now, we'd need to borrow at least $1 million. And I sort of did the math, and I thought it would take me 25, 30 years for me to pay that off. So, okay, in 25 years' time, how old am I going to be? I'm going to be at least 60. So I've got however long between the age of 60 and my retirement date to accumulate enough money for my eventual retirement. I know that's not going to happen just with my super guarantee contributions as well. So why don't I start building a passive income now? Or why don't I start investing more, thinking about where I put my money rather than putting into a home? Because even then, you see these ads on TV, especially for things like the equity unlock and reverse mortgages as well. You spend 25, 30 years paying off an overpriced house in an area where you want to live, but it might not be a particularly sound investment, only to hand it back to the bank that you've taken it off. And then often it's at a reduced rate. So they're not going to give you the full price of your home. It's going to be 50, 60, 70%. And then in the event of your death, the deeds are theirs. They sell it and recoup the losses in the hope that they've made some money.
Yes, and we talked about the word mortgage.
Yeah.
Tell us about the history of that word.
So I learnt the word is mortgage is a combination of two French words, meaning an engagement until death. And probably 40, 50 years ago, that would have been the case, where a 25, 30-year loan would have taken you up to your expected lifetime expectancy of mid-60s. In the 40s and 50s, that's how long you were expected to live for. So that probably would have been of the case at that period.
Yeah, now this certainly made my eyes fall out of my head, the engagement till death. And I'd never heard that before, but now that I've heard it, I sort of can't unhear it. And I can just imagine, advisors out there talking to their clients about their engagement until death.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't lead with that. It's a little bit, it's a little bit depressing. But I just think that financial advice needs to be more, firstly, goals based. So, what are your objectives? Like, your objective isn't to start a SMSF via direct property. It's to retire with a comfortable income, to pay for your child's education, to ensure that you live a comfortable lifestyle, maybe go on a holiday every 2 or 3 years. So they're your actual objectives that you need to work towards. And I think a financial advisor is the best place to sort of understand your needs and wants, and then provide, number one, the appropriate guidance, but number two, some perspective in terms of how likely are you to achieve those and how can you best prioritize those.
Yeah, so I agree. The financial advisor is the best decision-making tool somebody could use, and absolutely you're right, because that to be able to take that emotion and say yes, that's awesome, you've got that, and here is the best way for you to achieve your goals financially. Now, how do you want to go about it and allow people to be able to have that decision-making process using their advisor? Couldn't agree more. So how does that, if I go back to the Intrafund Advice being the stepping stone, does your fund, how should funds be working with financial advisors in the independent space to help clients in that overall aspect? And how can advisors work with the Intrafund or the Intrafund Advice to be able to help them provide some of the advice to their client?
Yeah, well, what normally happens within Aware Super is when a super member is with an intrafund advisor and they sort of discover that they have greater needs that are beyond the scope of scaled advice, then they're referred to one of our comprehensive advisors that can sort of provide them with advice beyond the scope of an intrafund advisor. And that's when it gets into your goal-based advice objectives, and they have a much greater range, if not a more complete and holistic view of a client's financial situation, and can provide them advice on the broad spectrum of advice. So that's where I think it needs to lead. It needs to be a stepping stone into advice and facilitate that understanding of what financial advice is and what they should expect out of financial advice. Yeah, for me, it's ease of access in terms of receiving financial advice for all Australians.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, tell me about paraplanning, because I've always thought that paraplanning was on a pathway to split between document creation, editing functionality, and strategy, and calculating financial strategies and helping. So to me, there's the admin part of it, and there is the planning part of it, which is super, super important. How do you see the future of paraplanning evolving?
I think when I first joined a fintech company, the CEO at the time famously sort of told me that his role was to make paraplanners redundant. And ever since I heard that, I think it more and more the opposite is the case, if anything. As an example, when I was a paraplanner, I used to average complete 1 to 2 SOAs per day. Now, as a financial advisor, typically you do maybe 2 or 3 per week. You'd actually present to your clients. Look, in terms of paraplanning, in terms of completing a statement of advice document and understanding the strategies, paraplans have a much broader breadth because they do a much greater volume of statement of advice documents. So they have a much greater understanding of the actual strategy itself because they've just seen more. And then number 2, they're quicker at producing statement of advice documents because they do them day in, day out. There's a production rhythm associated with completing a statement of advice document. Now, I think as well that paraplanners are even more essential because they reduce some of the admin time that advisors are required. So if I was an advisor and I was required to complete my own statement of advice document, it would remove the available time that I had to actually see clients, which is where an advisor needs to be. It needs to be in that client-facing time to sort of explain and educate their members on what the advice strategy is. So that's where paraplanners can really facilitate and be of use to financial advice. They can remove some of the admin time and do it at a much quicker turnaround time as well. Coming from a big bank as well, paraplanners were always seen as the first line of defense. So they were sort of the first to receive the file and sort of point out if there were any gaps or inefficiencies in their advice as well. And in some cases, even propose a better strategy to the financial advisor. So it's only to the benefit of the member for me sending a statement of advice request to a paraplanner.
So do you see paraplanning as the almost the first line of defense or the first line of compliance?
Yeah, exactly. Even in my time as a senior paraplanner, what our function was to vet the advice prior to turning it into a statement of advice document. So it was almost like a pre-audit. So based on the file, you were almost auditing the advice prior to being presented to the client, which again is part of the first line of defense.
Yeah, this is the the quality financial advice part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the advisor becomes the relationship person, getting all of the other moving parts to it. Whether it's some coaching, some presenting, some understanding, some consent. All these other parts of the process that need to take place.
Yeah, and you're always a little bit biased because it's your own advice as an advisor, and you always think, yep, it's hunky-dory. Again, you've got that sort of behavioral bias that, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I'm overconfident. But if you get a second set of eyes to sort of look at it, then they can sort of point out some of the gaps or inefficiencies in your advice.
Yeah, behavioral bias is such a big part of this, isn't it? It's like every time, we can all get better or do things in a better way, but criticism sometimes hurts and it's like hard to take and all these other things. Yeah. It's about, I guess, there becomes, especially if you're, if you're competitive type, in nature, then it's always very hard to take that criticism versus,
Yeah. I won't lie, there may have been one or two advisors that may have been a little bit defensive about their advice. And I completely understand as well, but it's just the nature of the process at the end of the day.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, talk to me, let's go back to technology. Obviously, technology is evolving at a fairly fast rate. We've got all sorts of things coming in. We've got some, robo tools that sort of, started off and then sort of didn't really go too far, and then there's still more of a future there, and there's more of a future in artificial intelligence as that develops as well. What are your thoughts on technology and how it's going to shape the profession?
Yeah, so some of the ways that technology may impact us in financial advice in the future is, we've talked about robo-advice, so members being able to plug in their details into a wizard of some sorts, and then the robo-advice would spit out a recommendation, essentially is what robo-advice is in a nutshell. There's also self-directed investment, but that has its own perils as well. So that's a lot along the lines of the example I provided before. Member wants to salary sacrifice. So they look, I want to salary sacrifice into my super. So the self-directed investment tool will facilitate that transaction for them without sort of receiving any advice.
Yeah. So just on that, just while we're there, I kind of felt like it started at the transactional end. Like there was a couple of quick questions and then bang into the implementation part of the process. If we look back the other direction towards, like education and information and financial confidence and all these other things, do you think there's a fair way that robo-advice can go back in that process and sort of start with, helping consumers understand concepts, strategies well before the implementation? But I guess it started with implementation because that's where the money is.
Yeah, I guess so. Look, I think robo-advice still definitely has a place because you can start with the goals first as well. And we can see goals placed into categories as well. So you've got your retirement goals, you've got your insurance goals, investment goals, and they can be bucketed into those sort of categories. And then after that, you can have your sort of set investment strategies based on some predetermined goals or objectives. Anything outside those sort of parameters, for me, it still requires, the eyes of an advisor. So I think that robo-advice, again, can provide sort of relatively cheap and easy access to advice, and it can educate members as to what sort of strategies correlate to which goals and objectives, and even provide education in the form of knowledge libraries and forums, material, even websites and pages and blogs and that sort of stuff as well to keep everybody up to date. But I still definitely think the future of advice has an advisor-centered approach, but just with these other forms of advice around the advisor supporting them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think we've used the phrase before that it's not necessarily technology that's going to take the jobs. It's other advisors using technology that are going to replace those that aren't.
Yeah, I think if anything, advisors need to leverage these new tools that are coming out to sort of strengthen their brand.
Yeah, there's a lot of things advisors are doing and need to do, and from legislation and change point of view. So it's always very difficult to juggle, where and when you do and don't do things. And there's always going to be a new shiny technology coming up too, which is keeps us all excited.
Yeah. So technology is ever evolving to the point of, AI introducing social media scraping to understand, when there's a change in your lifestyle or your situation, whether there's a new addition or change in your relationship or a change in your circumstances. AI will be able to predict and highlight when a need needs to be addressed by the financial advisor and sort of flags that your profile might need to come up for a review. So there's all sorts of things AI can do to facilitate, even to the point where it sort of reads through your interactions with the advisor through speech-to-text software and sort of understand whether an interaction was positive or negative in nature, or whether the member sort of understood the message that was being conveyed. So there's some sort of crazy AI concepts that are being developed in the probably not too distant future.
Yeah, there certainly is. The artificial intelligence space is, it's kind of like a whole lot of jigsaw puzzle pieces at the moment. There's a whole lot of interesting little things that can happen, and it's a matter of putting that jigsaw puzzle together and then working out how it could work for a member. You mentioned social media scraping? It's obviously fairly prevalent when you're a social media company and understanding with algorithms and what ads to put in front of people. Do you see that evolving to the point where that will become, maybe the business model of these tech companies would be, well, let's actually sell this information of our client to somebody, not just from an advertising point of view, but something like their super fund and their bank and their behavioural stuff?
Yeah, look, I hope not. And it really depends on the privacy laws as well associated with that sort of stuff. But in all seriousness, like there's tools out there today that allow screen scraping through API integration. And there's a lot of projects around unstructured data, even to the point of where they're scanning paper-based documents and turning unstructured data into structured data as well. So I think technology is ever evolving, and I'm really not too sure of what's going to happen, even if I do have some reservations about people's privacy and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Now you mentioned structured data, which is really important because, so many filing cabinets, in the old days filing cabinets, but also, just files that people have on their clients, for financial advisors have, they've collected all this data, but it's not structured in a way. How do you see the structuring of that data becoming really important for financial planners? Yeah,
so the structure of that data needs to be, it needs to be sort of efficient enough for people to sort of understand, because again, the requirements of an audit or maintaining compliance can be sort of difficult and costly. So if you have sort of structured and efficient documents and notes, that'll reduce a lot of the burden around audit and compliance, particularly for financial advisors, but also dealer groups and licensees as well. And it'll just, when ASIC comes knocking on the door, it'll just make things all the more easier. There's even projects and consultants around where they do automated file scanning, and they turn unstructured data into sort of structured data through categorizing and understanding a document based on its image and what it says on that piece of paper as well. So the collection of that unstructured data has been a real sort of opportunity, particularly for a number of consultancy firms and how they collect that information from practices that, like you said, have these filing cabinets lying around the offices.
Yeah, there's certainly so many different exciting parts of technology that can come, and I think there's still so many things that are beginning to be solved, but are still a long way from being solved. And I guess it's kind of a waiting game in many ways.
Yeah, I think as technology evolves, we're going to be finding opportunities to do better, and it's going to grow exponentially as well. I'm sort of scared at the sort of pace at which things are evolving.
Yeah, interesting. It's going to be interesting for your kids as they grow up to see the difference, but see how we go. So tell us what else you're working on in the future with regard to with your work and where you see that going.
So I mentioned that I'm looking to implement a continuous improvement process, and I feel that's something that every business, let alone financial advice practice or office, needs to implement. As the Intrafund practice and process manager, I don't day in, day out provide advice. So I need to rely on my stakeholders and team members to not only highlight the problems that occur, but to highlight the opportunities to do better and, make it easier to facilitate the process of providing advice, as well as ensure that there are no risks within the process. So that's predominantly my approach, whether those opportunities or problems rely on a technology solution or they rely on even a low-tech solution. That's needs to be seen. We need to sort of address the problem or opportunity first before we head down that path.
Yeah, fantastic. As you said, continual improvement means continually things that you have to do and problems you've got to solve. So that's good.
I'm a big fan of the phrase that there's no such thing as perfect, but we can still sort of always strive to be perfect, sort of thing.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, you're also a big advocate. I see you on LinkedIn all the time. If people wanted to continue a conversation and carry on some ideas or throw some ideas at you, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, look, I'm more than happy for people to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Just shoot me a DM and I'm more than happy to answer any questions or have a chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Fraser, for having me. Appreciate the time.
Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the XY Advisor podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure bringing that to you. My name is Fraser Jack, and I am here with Emily Blanche today to give a couple of quick shout-outs.
Thanks, Fraser. I want to give a quick shout-out to the XY Advisors who have joined the Video Creation Masterclass. It's a 3-month deep dive, and these advisors have just kicked off week 1. They are going to be leveling up their video skills over the next 3 months, and I can't wait to see their progress. So I'll absolutely check in. So well done, guys. Can't wait to see how it goes.
And you can find that over at the app, the platform. If you look up under the courses section, you'll be able to jump on that. And just remember that if you're an XY Plus member, you can get a bit of a discount to that. Fantastic. We'll see you in the next episode.